A doctor accused of concocting an elaborate fraud is defending his controversial autism study today. Dr. Andrew Wakefield's 1998 study claimed the MMR vaccine, which immunizes against measles, mumps, and rubella, was connected to autism. Now a report by the British Medical Journal says Wakefield purposely altered facts, an allegation he denies.
The claims to whether the vaccine caused their children harm or not came from the parents, not me. I didn't have a preconceived notion about this at all. I hadn't heard of autism since medical school. And this was a clinical examination of children on the merits of their clinical problems by the best people in the world.
Wakefield's study panicked parents, triggered a decade-long debate about the vaccine. He says the allegations against him are nothing more than a smear campaign. With us now is investigative journalist Brian Deere, who conducted the original analysis of the autism studies for the Sunday Times of London. Brian, what made you want to look into autism and this study?
Well, I was just given a routine assignment way back in late 2003, and that routine assignment very quickly came upon Dr. Wakefield and his relentless lying. We just put very simple questions to him at that time. He refused to be interviewed, and he acted in a way that was plainly suspicious. So we then pursued him a little bit further and a little bit further, and at each stage we came upon the same form of behaviour, and eventually we got access through a medical disciplinary hearing to the original records of the children who he had carried out research on, and found that they couldn't be reconciled with what he'd published.
So if I understand you correctly, sir, then what made you suspicious was not necessarily the data, but it was the personality of the man who built that data.
Well, I had questions about the data in the first place, in the sense that I couldn't understand quite how the paper had been constructed. It didn't make sense at face value, but it was his behaviour within a very short period of time. And I think the police often encounter this when police officers interview somebody and the demeanour of the person they're interviewing arouses suspicion, and that certainly was the case with Dr. Wakefield.
So, sir, you allege outright fraud by him. Why would he do this? To what end?
Well, let's correct you. The allegation of outright fraud, the evaluation of this situation as being outright fraud, is not merely what I say. This is what the editors of an international medical journal say after very carefully examining all of the evidence, patient records, having the work peer-reviewed. So it's not just me. You see, Wakefield wants to sort of suggest that somehow just one reporter is after him. This is not at all true. This is a matter that has been put forward by an international medical journal who've concluded that what he did was outright fraud.
So back to the first question, why would he do it? What's in it for him?
Why would he do it? He did it for money. He did it firstly for money for his research. Academic researchers always need money. Wakefield for a long period of time was dependent on the pharmaceutical industry for his support. He then realised that he needed more money to try and prove a theory that he had about the cause of bowel disease, and he got money from lawyers who paid for this study. Then he further wanted more money for himself, because the lawyers then went on to pay him very large sums of money. I don't know what the exchange rate is with Canadian dollars, but it was 435,000 British pounds, about 750,000 American dollars, paid him personally to do this work. And he also had a whole raft of business plans that were intended to make him millions of dollars through selling various spin-off vaccines and treatments and diagnostic kits.
What is interesting here with all of this building up against him, Dr. Wakefield has been very public over the last 24 hours. He's appeared on a lot of television outlets. He's defending himself, saying, this is not my research. This was reported to me by the parents.
Well, that's completely untrue. We've established from the medical records that the parents actually didn't say many of the things that he says they said. And when we looked at the medical records, we found that, for example, children who he said had regressive autism didn't in fact have autism at all. Children who he said developed their developmental problems after vaccination, in fact developed them before vaccination. Children who he said had developed their problems within days of vaccination, in fact had no problems for months. So it was his relentless alteration, misreporting, chiselling of data that lies behind this. And when we did a final evaluation of these 12 children, we found that in not one case had he truthfully reported the true status of these children. In not one case could their medical records be reconciled with the evidence that he'd published in the original paper.
Sir, is it your sense that this is a one-off with this doctor, or is there a systemic problem here with the transparency of research?
Well, I think the takeaway lesson from all this is not just about vaccinations. It's about the integrity of science generally, because science publications are all anonymised. You don't know anything about the patients. You don't know where the data comes from. You can't check it for yourself. Unlike with newspapers and broadcasting, where other competitor organisations and the public generally can check whether facts are true, you simply don't know. And the enormous cost, there was a 2-year disciplinary inquiry that generated the information on this. I've been working on this on and off for 7 years. That huge investment of resources to get to the bottom of this study of just 12 children, you can imagine what else could be going on that we just can't get to the bottom of.
It's interesting, though. It was my assumption that any results you have from a landmark study have to stand up to being duplicated by other researchers using similar technique. Why was this not done?
Well, nobody has ever replicated what Wakefield claimed. We'll be reporting more about that in the BMJ next week, but no one has ever replicated what Wakefield claims. He falsely claims that researchers, he says, I think 5 different papers have been published replicating his claims. Completely untrue, but he simply says these things and he goes public in media, as he has done in the last 24 hours, because he knows that broadcasters, journalists and the public generally cannot evaluate his claims, cannot get to the bottom of what he's saying. I have got to the bottom of what he's saying, but it's took me the best part of 7 years' work to do it. So he knows that he can say anything he likes, and you'll have on the one hand him saying this, and on the other hand you'll have doctors and myself saying something else. And he knows he just has to split the difference between the two to be able to carve out a nice little living. I understand he's been doing interviews from Jamaica, where there's an anti-vaccine conference going on at the moment, where a handful of doctors have met together to try and plot a new campaign against vaccines. Very nice. Hope he's having a lovely time in Jamaica.
Brian Deere is the man who conducted the original analysis of the autism studies. Congratulations, sir. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.